Back on one of my favorite topics here on BookTube, and that is men making videos about how there are no books for men. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video in which I'm going to talk about the issue of whether or not there are books being published for men, whether or not men can get published. Are men being left behind? Does this explain why men aren't reading? And the focus of this video is a video I saw from author and author-tuber John A. Douglas. I'll leave a link to his video down below, which was just titled No Books for Men, which I watched, and I really thought it was really interesting and in a lot of ways very different from the other videos on this topic that I have addressed here on my channel. I think there is a sincerity in Mr. Douglas's video that is missing. He isn't talking about how publishing has been taken over by women and how women are preventing men from being published. None of that. His focus is on, particularly focused on sci-fi and fantasy. I think more fantasy than anything else, because I believe that's what he writes, and how the attention given and the spotlight or the focus of publishing being on these female-centered fantasy books, and the way the covers of those books are designed essentially don't leave enough room for books by male fantasy authors and don't attract male fantasy readers. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit here in this video, and kind of reflect, even in myself, on whether or not what he's saying is right. So I do think there's a little bit that's reactionary in this video. I do think he is probably frustrated. I think some indications frustration about the situation comes up when he's talking about the fact that his own work is published independently. And I'll leave, like I said, I'll show you a cover of his book here in a minute, and certainly you can find him easily on Amazon and check out his work. I've never read his work. I think there's a little bit reactionary content here, that he's frustrated as an author that there isn't space for male authors, or it doesn't feel like there's enough space given to male authors on shelves. But I do think that this goes way beyond just the reactionary misogyny thing we see from other videos I've talked about. I don't think there's much of that here. Like I said, I don't know Douglas, but I don't think there's much of that here. I think he really is trying to address this from a fairly direct and honest place. And so I want to take his arguments seriously. There are a couple of things I disagree with. One, he says that men are naturally drawn to books in which manly men wreak havoc on evil people. I'm not so sure that that is a fair statement. I know a number of women who and have watched channels here on YouTube, a number of women who really enjoyed the Witcher series in some way or another, and that is an example of a muscly man wreaking havoc on evil people and evil civilization. So I don't think that those books appeal exclusively to men. In addition to that, I don't think all men are interested in those books. I would have to say I'm not one of those people who's interested in those kinds of books. But taking what he says, with outside myself, I kind of can see his point here, even though I don't think that's a particularly good point to make. The second thing I would say is that when he's talking about the folks being put on female-authored and female-centered fantasy, he goes to a Target and looks at the bookshelves there as an example of how almost all the books in the fantasy section are female-authored and female-centered. And then he goes to a Barnes & Noble and he looks at the tables, the TikTok tables, the new release tables, the fantasy shelves themselves, and he kind of shows the same thing, how those shelves and those spaces are dominated by female-authored, female-centered fantasy. And he kind of uses the word gives, that the spotlight is given to these books and that not enough space is given for books in the fantasy genre that are written by men or center on male characters. The use of that word given is something I want to get back to here in a minute. So I wanted to talk about his points as best as I can, assuming I understood them. His best point has to do with covers. So what Mr. Douglas points to are covers like these, and these are covers of female-authored, I think primarily female-authored, female-centered fantasy books. Maybe some of them are romantasy. I'm not exactly sure what the definition there is. And so these are what those covers look like. And his argument is that these aren't covers that appeal to him as a man, and he doesn't think they appeal to other male readers. And while I can look at those covers and say, well, I think those covers are attractive, I've never bought one of those books. I've never thought about reading one of those books. So maybe he has a point about the covers being, in some ways repelling male readers. Now, I'm not arguing that the covers should be redesigned to appeal to male readers. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having book covers designed for female readers to draw female readers' attention. As a matter of fact, as one of the things Mr. Douglas and I are going to agree on is marketing-wise and book sales-wise, that just makes sense. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But I do kind of see his point. I don't read a lot of fantasy as it is. But I wonder if part of the reason why I don't pick up one of those books and at least try them has something to do with the cover. So I'm going to give him that point there. I forgot to mention this, but I was talking about covers. I was going to show you a picture of Mr. Douglas's book cover, and so I'll put it right here. And I will tell you that looking at that cover, I find that cover to be engaging. And so maybe, as a male reader, he's right. A second thing he acknowledges is that there are male authors who are being published and their books can be found on the shelves, but that they're crowded out or they're not given as much space as these books by female authors with female-centered books. So I'm interested to know, and I don't know this, so this is really more a question. Does the book have to have a male author for it to be a book that appeals to men, in his opinion, or can that book have, center on a male characters? I'm thinking of Robin Hobb's book, the Farseer books, which I believe I've read the first one, Assassin's Apprentice, are based on a male character. So, is there a division there, which he's making? The other thing I just point out is that women do read fantasy books by male authors all the time. And it really is only men who don't seem to read fantasy books by female authors. And in that case, I don't think this is a case of marketing or some kind of conspiracy in the publishing industry. I think this is just a case of men not liking to read books by women. Now, in his defense, Mr. Douglas lists a number of female fantasy authors whose books he enjoys reading, that he likes a great deal. So I'm not saying that he won't do that. I'm just saying that from the point of view of his argument, it seems to be saying that men don't want to read books written by women. And then the biggest part of his argument, going back to something I said earlier, is this idea that he seems to imply that fantasy books written by male authors or that are centered on male characters should be given more space in an effort to attract and, bring more young men into reading. This, I think, kind of just fails the basic test of what book publishing is all about. And this is something he acknowledges, by the way. But the truth of the matter is, we can't look to corporations to do things that are, for the good of society. Corporations, big businesses do things that are good for them and for their stockholders. And so book publishing companies, particularly the big five, are looking to make money. And in that idea of making money, why should they risk big PR, big promotion behind a book that's untested when they can go back to a formula that's been working for them before? And why shouldn't they want, Barnes & Noble and other bookstores to put those books by those female-centered fantasy books by female authors on the front tables to sell more, because that's what's working for them. And so I guess one of the things, and this is something common in my criticism of videos like Mr. Douglas's book, my criticism of that is that that space is earned. That space is earned by sales. And if you want fantasy books by male authors centering on male characters to have those spaces, to get more shelf space, to be on the table at the front, then I think as someone who reads and enjoys fantasy written by men about male characters, you have to be active on social media to promote those things, to create that market, to do what has happened with books like Fourth Wing or Court of Crown and Roses or any of those other books where you see women on social media promoting and pushing those books. If you want that same kind of attention paid to works by male authors, you have to get the publisher's attention, and the way to do that is through sales and through promotion. So I really don't think that space can be given, or we should expect publishers to give that space to male authors for male-centered fantasies. I think that space has to be earned, and I think that the space that is taken up by female fantasy authors whose books center on female characters has been earned through marketing, through sales, through the work of their fans to promote those books. And I think that's really the way forward, and not through any kind of campaign to suggest that publishers are doing the wrong thing and are alienating young male readers, because I don't think publishers are going to react to that unless those book sales go up. Anyway, like I said, links to the video will be down below. Look forward to your comments in the comment section as always, and thank you for watching.